I exposed my brother. Here's what happened next. Vincent pulled out more documents with the air of a prosecutor building an airtight case. Your father has authorized immediate changes effective today. You are removed from all financial access to any of your father's accounts. You're barred from handling any part of your father's estate, now or after his death, pending completion of full restitution. He slid another document across the table. A professional trustee will be appointed to work alongside Monica to ensure proper management and oversight. Trent stood up so fast his leather chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. You can't do this. That's my inheritance. I'm his son. The words hung in the air like a confession, damning in their naked honesty. Vincent's expression hardened noticeably. Nothing is your inheritance until your father passes, and given this behavior, I'd strongly recommend he reconsider his will entirely, which he has. He slid another document across the table. New will, executed this morning. You inherit nothing unless you repay every stolen dollar with interest and complete court-ordered financial counseling and therapy. Trent's face went white, then red, then a mottled purple. This is because of her. He pointed at me with shaking fingers. She poisoned you against me. Dad's voice came out stronger than I'd heard in months, cutting through Trent's hysteria like a blade. Get out. Trent froze, his pointing finger still extended. Dad, please, just listen for 1 minute. Get out of this office. Get out of my house. I don't want to see you. Dad's hands are still shaking, but his eyes were crystal clear and hard as stone. I gave you everything. I trusted you with my life, and you counted my money with your friends like it was some kind of joke. You called your sister a failure because she's not married. You said I won't last long anyway. You were already spending my money before I was even dead. Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. You made me think Monica was hurting me. You made me doubt my own daughter, who's been taking care of me every single day, while you showed up once a week for an hour. Trent tried one more time, his voice breaking into something that might have been genuine emotion. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your son. I'm still family. Vincent stood up, physically placing himself between Trent and Dad with protective authority. This meeting is over, Vincent said firmly. I'll be in touch with law enforcement regarding the documented thefts. I strongly suggest you contact an attorney immediately. He gestured toward the door. Mr. Delton, you need to leave now. Trent looked at me then, his expression twisted with rage and desperation, and something that might have been genuine pain. You ruined my life, he said, his voice raw. You destroyed everything. Are you happy now? You got what you wanted, Dad, all to yourself. The pathetic spinster wins. I met his gaze steadily and spoke for the first time since the meeting began. I didn't ruin your life, Trent. You did. I just made sure Dad saw the truth. He stared at me for another moment, then turned and walked out. The door didn't slam. It closed with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than any dramatic exit. Vincent walked to the door and locked it, then returned to his seat. I need to inform you both of additional actions I've taken. As of this morning, I filed a report with the Washington State Attorney General's office regarding elder financial abuse. I've also contacted the Spokane Police Department. Detective Sarah Chen will want to interview both of you. Dad sat quietly beside me, his breathing gradually slowing to normal as the adrenaline of confrontation faded. I'm sorry, Monica, he finally whispered. I'm so sorry I believed him. I should have trusted you. You gave up everything to take care of me, and I questioned you. I doubted you. He turned to look at me directly, his eyes wet but clear. He made it sound so reasonable. The stress, the bills, the mistakes, and you're my daughter. You're not married. You don't have your own family. I thought maybe it was too much for you. I thought maybe he was right that women your age struggle with pressure. I took his hand gently, feeling how much thinner it had become. You trusted your son. That's not wrong, Dad. He's the one who betrayed that trust. He used your love and your confusion as weapons. Vincent poured water from a crystal pitcher, handing glasses to both of us. The trustee I'm recommending is Marianne Chen, someone I've worked with for 15 years. She's excellent and will work with Monica to ensure everything is properly managed. He looked at me with something like admiration. You saved your father from a very bad situation. That took courage and remarkable restraint. Most people would have confronted Trent immediately and lost all their leverage. Detective Sarah Chen arrived at our house 3 days later with a recording device and patient questions. She listened to my entire story, watched all 17 videos, and reviewed Kyle's signed confession with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen this pattern before. Elder financial abuse is epidemic, she said, closing her notebook. Adult children stealing from aging parents, especially when there's cognitive decline involved. But you did something most victims never do. You documented everything systematically before confronting the perpetrator. She looked at me with professional respect. That's going to make prosecution straightforward. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Trent's planning became clear. He hadn't just stolen cash, he'd deliberately caused bills to go unpaid to make me look incompetent. He'd systematically contacted every family member to build the narrative of my breakdown. He'd created a perfect trap designed to remove me from Dad's care while positioning himself as the savior. The total damage, $14,347 stolen, plus another $6,000 in bills he'd deliberately allowed to lapse. Not enough to destroy Dad financially, but enough to show systematic, ongoing theft and fraud. Trent hired a lawyer within days, a slick attorney from Seattle who immediately tried to negotiate. He called Vincent with an offer. Trent would pay back half the stolen money over 5 years if all charges were dropped and he remained in the will. Your father just misunderstood, the lawyer said smoothly. This is a family matter that should stay private. Public prosecution will only bring embarrassment to everyone. Vincent's response was cold and final. My client rejects your offer completely. The state attorney will proceed with all charges. Tell your client to prepare for arraignment. When Vincent told us about the call, Dad's response surprised me with its firmness. Actions have consequences, he said. My son needs to learn that. If he'd just admitted what he'd done and apologized genuinely, maybe we could have worked something out. But he called Monica a pathetic spinster even after he was caught. No mercy. Meanwhile, relatives who'd called to check on my supposed mental breakdown now called to apologize with varying degrees of sincerity. Aunt Francine actually showed up at our door crying. I'm so sorry, Monica. I should have trusted you. Trent was always so convincing, so smooth with his words, but I should have known better. You've always been the responsible one. She hugged me tightly. I'm ashamed I doubted you. Uncle Wallace sent a long email explaining how Trent had systematically contacted every family member, carefully building the narrative of my incompetence over months. He played us all, Wallace wrote. He's a sociopath. I'm sorry we were so easily manipulated. Dad's sister called from Florida in tears. Your father told me everything. How Trent stole from him, blamed you, tried to have you removed. I feel sick that I believed those things about you being overwhelmed and emotional. I'm so sorry, honey. I accepted their apologies but kept my emotional distance. They'd believed lies without question, had been ready to accept that an unmarried woman my age was inherently unstable and incompetent. Their prejudices had made them easy targets for Trent's manipulation. Forgiveness would take time. 2 months after the meeting in Vincent's office, Trent's arraignment took place in Spokane County Superior Court. Dad and I attended, sitting in the back row while Trent stood before Judge Patricia Morrison in an ill-fitting suit. His Seattle lawyer argued for reduced charges, citing Trent's clean record and willingness to make restitution. The state prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Reeves, presented the evidence methodically. 17 videos of theft. Kyle's detailed confession describing Trent's leadership of the operation. Bank records showing systematic cash withdrawals. Text messages showing Trent's deliberate campaign to discredit me. The judge listened without expression, reviewing documents on her bench. Finally, she looked up at Trent. Mr. Delton, elder financial abuse is a particularly heinous crime because it exploits trust in the most fundamental family relationship. The evidence against you is overwhelming. I'm denying your attorney's request for reduced charges. She set bail at $50,000 and ordered Trent to surrender his passport. His face went white as she continued. You're forbidden from any contact with your father or sister. Trial is set for 90 days from now. 3 months after the arraignment, Trent accepted a plea deal. 4 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 2. Full restitution of $20,347 including fees and interest. Mandatory financial counseling and therapy. Permanent removal from Dad's will unless he completed all terms and demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Vincent called to tell us the news. He'll serve his time at Coyote Ridge Corrections Center. His lawyer managed to argue for the lighter sentence because Trent has no prior criminal record, but the judge was clear this was a lenient deal given the evidence. He paused. Your father's impact statement was powerful. The judge specifically cited it when explaining the sentence. Dad had written 3 pages describing not the financial loss, but the betrayal of trust, the exploitation of his cognitive decline, and the systematic campaign to destroy his daughter's reputation. The money can be repaid, Dad had written, but the trust between father and son cannot be replaced. What my son destroyed wasn't my bank account, it was my faith in family. The judge had read portions of it aloud in court. Trent had wept. His lawyer said it was remorse. I suspected it was self-pity. With Marianne Chen's help, we rebuilt Dad's financial systems from the ground up. She established automated bill payments, reorganized his accounts, and created documentation protocols that would protect him from future exploitation. Your father's accounts are stable, his bills are managed automatically, and his cognitive assessment shows his decline has actually plateaued, she reported during our 3-month review. The stress reduction from resolving the situation with your brother seems to have helped significantly. Dad did look healthier. Proper medication management, regular routine, and the peace of knowing his finances were secure had all contributed to his improvement. But the most unexpected change came from a phone call I received 6 months after Trent's sentencing. My former boss at Hutchinson & Cole was on the line. Monica, I heard through the legal community grapevine what happened. Your handling of this situation was brilliant. Textbook evidence collection. He paused. I know you left to care for your father, but I want you to know we have a position opening for a senior litigation specialist. If you're interested in returning to work once your father's situation stabilizes, we'd love to talk. The offer stirred something in me I hadn't felt in months. Professional recognition, career possibilities, a future beyond caregiving. That night, I mentioned the offer to Dad. His response was immediate. You should do it. You should absolutely do it. He leaned forward in his recliner, more animated than I'd seen him in weeks. Monica, you gave up your career to take care of me. But with Marianne helping manage things, you don't have to do everything alone anymore. You could work part-time, build your career back up. He smiled. You could have your own life again. You deserve that. Over the following weeks, an idea began forming in my mind. It started with a conversation with Detective Chen during a follow-up interview. You know what frustrates me most, she said. By the time most families realize elder abuse is happening, it's too late. The money's gone, the trust is destroyed, the evidence is lost, victims don't know what to look for, caregivers don't know how to protect themselves from false accusations. She looked at me thoughtfully. You did everything right. You documented, you stayed calm, you built an airtight case. That knowledge could help thousands of families. I started writing that night. I documented my experience and the strategies that had worked. The security camera installation, the evidence backup systems, the financial documentation that protected my reputation, the legal steps that preserved Dad's assets. The manuscript grew to 100 pages covering legal strategies, technology solutions, documentation requirements, and communication techniques. I sent it to Detective Chen for review. She called me 2 days later. Monica, this is exceptional. Every caregiver in America should read this. Have you considered publishing it? Vincent connected me with a small publisher specializing in elder care resources. They loved the manuscript. Personal story plus practical guidance is exactly what the market needs, the editor said. We'd like to publish this as part of our caregiver advocacy series. The book was fast-tracked for publication, scheduled for release in 6 months. But the publisher wanted more. Would you consider speaking at conferences? We have connections with the National Alliance for Caregiving, the Elder Care Workforce Alliance. They're always looking for speakers with real experience and practical solutions. I thought about Trent calling me a pathetic spinster, a failure, incompetent. I thought about relatives pitying me for living with my father. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything, to prejudice and manipulation. Yes, I said, I'll speak. 6 months after that devastating meeting in Vincent's office, I stood at a podium in front of 200 family caregivers at the Western Regional Caregiving Conference in Portland. My heart pounded as I looked out at the audience, mostly women, mostly middle-aged, all carrying the weight of caring for aging parents while managing skeptical families and their own exhaustion. My name is Monica Delton, I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. And 18 months ago, my brother was systematically stealing from our father while convincing everyone I was incompetent because I'm an unmarried woman in my late 40s. The room went utterly silent. He used societal prejudices about single women and elder care as weapons. He counted on my father's confusion and everyone's gender bias. He almost won. I told them the whole story, holding nothing back. The cash counting scene, the false accusations, the gaslighting. The security camera evidence that saved everything. I showed them how to protect themselves with documentation, legal structures, and technology. I explained warning signs of financial abuse and manipulation tactics to watch for. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Women lined up afterward to share their own stories. My brother did the exact same thing to our mother, one woman told me, tears streaming. But I didn't have proof. He got away with it. Mom died thinking I'd stolen from her. Another woman grabbed my hands. I'm installing cameras tomorrow. My sister-in-law keeps suggesting I'm not handling Dad's money correctly, but I know she's the one taking it. You just saved my father's estate. A man approached with his daughter. My wife has been caring for my mother for 3 years. Her brothers keep questioning everything she does. This is exactly what we needed to hear. The conference organizer approached me afterward with an offer I never expected. We want you as a keynote speaker next year, and we're recommending you to 5 other major caregiving conferences. What you're offering, personal experience plus practical solutions plus legal awareness, is invaluable. My book, Invisible No More, One Woman's Fight Against Elder Abuse and Gender Bias, launched 2 months later. It sold 15,000 copies in its first 6 months. The reader reviews made me cry. This book saved my mother from financial abuse by my stepfather. I recognized the warning signs because of Monica's story and got help in time. Every adult daughter should read this. But more than the sales numbers, it was the personal letters that showed me the real impact. A woman from Ohio wrote, 5 years ago, my brother-in-law accused me of stealing from my husband's mother while I was her primary caregiver. The family believed him. I lost relationships that mattered. Your book helped me understand it wasn't about me, it was about society's prejudice against female caregivers. Thank you for making me visible. A daughter from Texas. I installed cameras like you did. Caught my uncle stealing from my grandmother. Because of your documentation strategies, we had everything we needed for prosecution. Grandma's estate is protected now. The speaking invitations multiplied. I presented at conferences in Denver, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was part of a movement. 2 years after his arrest, Trent sent me a letter from Coyote Ridge Correction Center. The handwriting was shaky, the tone different from any previous interaction. Monica, I saw you on TV talking about your advocacy work. You look successful and happy. I guess you won. Dad believes you. Everyone believes you. You got what you wanted. But then the tone shifted. I've had a lot of time to think in here. A lot of therapy, mandatory and otherwise. They make you examine your behavior, your thought patterns, your prejudices. I've started to understand what I did wasn't just theft. It was cruelty. The letter continued for 3 pages, describing his growing awareness of how he'd used gender bias as a weapon, how he'd exploited societal prejudices, how he'd convinced himself those prejudices were true. I told myself you were pathetic for being unmarried, incompetent for being a woman, weak for choosing caregiving. I told myself I deserved Dad's money because I was the son. I was raised to think I mattered more, and I never questioned it until a judge explained that elder abuse isn't about money, it's about power and entitlement. He ended with something that might have been genuine. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know I understand now what I destroyed. Not just Dad's trust, your reputation, your sense of safety in your own family. I'm sorry. I showed the letter to Dad. He read it slowly, his expression complicated with grief and anger, and something that might have been hope. Do you think he means it? He asked. I considered the question carefully. I think prison and therapy have forced him to confront things he's spent his life avoiding. Whether that translates to real change, I don't know. Time will tell. Dad folded the letter carefully. He's my son. I can't stop loving him, but I also can't forget what he did, or pretend it didn't happen. He looked at me. What do you want to do? I thought about the terror of those weeks when everyone believed Trent's lies. The sick feeling of watching Dad doubt me. The loneliness of being dismissed as an incompetent, emotional woman. But I also thought about the 200 caregivers who'd lined up to thank me in Portland. The letters from readers whose families I'd helped save. The new career I'd built from ashes. I want to acknowledge his letter. I want to tell him I'm glad he's getting help. But I'm not ready for more than that. Maybe someday. Dad nodded. That's fair. That's more than fair. I wrote back to Trent a week later. A brief note acknowledging his letter, expressing hope that his therapy continued, but being clear about boundaries. I'm glad you're working on yourself. I hope that work continues after your release, but rebuilding any kind of relationship will take years, not months. I need to protect my own well-being first. 2 years after the security camera footage changed everything, Dad called me into his study with an announcement. I want to make one more change, he said. I want to fund your work. You're helping families across the country, but you're doing it part-time while still caring for me. I want to establish a grant through your publisher to support caregivers writing about their experiences. $25,000 annually. The Monica Delton Caregiver Advocacy Grant. I felt tears prick my eyes. Dad, that's not necessary. It absolutely is, he interrupted firmly. You saved my life and my legacy. Now I want to help you save others. The grant launched 6 months later with significant press coverage. The publisher partnered with the National Alliance for Caregiving to administer it, selecting 3 caregiver authors annually to receive funding while writing about their experiences with elder care, financial abuse, or family dynamics. At the grant announcement ceremony, I spoke about the importance of caregiver voices. We're so often invisible, dismissed as overly emotional, accused of self-interest. Our stories are devalued because caregiving is seen as women's work. Not real work, but our experiences matter. Our knowledge is valuable, and our voices deserve to be heard. 3 years after exposing Trent's theft, Dad's health began declining more noticeably. The cognitive impairment progressed to early-stage dementia. But this time, everything was in place. Marianne managed his finances flawlessly. His medical care was coordinated by a team who knew his full history. His estate planning was ironclad, protected from any future manipulation. And I had help. My work had grown to the point where I'd hired an assistant caregiver, a young woman named Shanice, who was studying social work and wanted experience in elder care. Between Shanice, Marianne, Dad's medical team, and my own advocacy work, we provided Dad with excellent care while ensuring I didn't sacrifice my career or identity again. This was what proper elder care looked like. The decision to move Dad to a memory care facility was painful but necessary. I visited daily, and Marianne ensured his finances covered the best possible care. The guilt I felt about the transition was eased by my therapist. You've given your father 5 years of excellent care and protection, she reminded me. Moving him to professional care isn't abandonment. It's ensuring he gets what he needs while preserving your ability to continue your advocacy work. She was right. Dad died peacefully in his sleep at the memory care facility 5 years after I'd exposed Trent's theft. He was 84. Trent was allowed to attend the funeral on supervised parole. He'd completed his therapy requirements and been working for 3 years at an elder advocacy nonprofit. He looked genuinely devastated by Dad's death. At the reception after the funeral, he approached me carefully. Monica, I know this isn't the time, but I want you to know I'm grateful for the years you gave Dad. The good care, the protection from people like me, the stability. He told me in one of our supervised calls that you saved his life twice, once from my theft and once from isolation. His voice cracked. I destroyed so much, but at least he had you. I looked at my brother, this person who'd once tried to annihilate me using societal prejudice as a weapon. Thank you for saying that. I think Dad forgave you, in his way. I'm not there yet, but maybe someday. He nodded. I don't expect it. I just hope you know I understand what I destroyed, and I'm genuinely trying to be better. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises of future closeness. But we stood together at our father's funeral without active hostility, which was something. Dad's will was executed exactly as written. The house and bulk of his savings went to me. Trent received a smaller sum contingent on his continued therapy and advocacy work, enough to provide stability, but not wealth. The remainder funded the caregiver advocacy grant in perpetuity, ensuring it would support caregiver voices for generations. Trent didn't contest the will. His lawyer released a statement saying Trent believed the distribution was fair given the circumstances. At the will reading, he told Vincent simply, "Monica earned everything she got. I earned what I lost." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said. I used part of my inheritance to expand my advocacy work, establishing the Delton Center for Caregiver Rights, a nonprofit providing legal support, documentation training, and advocacy resources for family caregivers nationwide. The center partnered with elder law attorneys, social workers, and policy advocates to address the systemic issues I'd identified. We provided free consultations, template documentation systems, and intervention services for caregivers facing accusations or exploitation. 8 years after the security camera footage changed everything, the Elder Caregiver Protection Act passed both chambers of Congress and was signed into law. I stood in the White House Rose Garden as the president signed the bill, surrounded by caregivers who'd shared their stories, advocates who'd fought for change, and legislators who'd championed the cause. This legislation recognizes what family caregivers have known forever, the president said in his remarks. Caring for aging parents is vital work that deserves protection, support, and respect. No caregiver should face exploitation or false accusations while sacrificing their own well-being for family. He gestured toward me. Monica Delton turned personal betrayal into national advocacy. Her courage in sharing her story and demanding systemic change has protected millions of caregivers from the nightmares she survived. The applause was overwhelming. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment. My own apartment in downtown Spokane, bought with income from my books and consulting work, and thought about the journey from that kitchen scene 8 years ago. Trent counting cash while Dad walked in confused. The moment I'd reached for my phone, choosing documentation over confrontation. The long months of watching, waiting, building evidence while being systematically undermined. The woman I'd been then, terrified, isolated, dismissed as an incompetent spinster, felt like a different person. I'd been so afraid of being invisible, of having my competence questioned, of losing everything I'd sacrificed to build. Trent had tried to make those fears reality, weaponizing every prejudice society held about unmarried middle-aged women. But he'd miscalculated. He'd assumed I would be too emotional, too incompetent, too weak to fight back effectively. He'd underestimated what a woman with legal training, technical knowledge, and absolute determination could accomplish. I'd taken his weapon, invisibility, and turned it into my shield. While he performed confidence, I quietly documented. While he built narratives, I collected evidence. While he counted my weaknesses, I counted his crimes. And when the moment came, I'd presented truth so comprehensive it demolished his lies completely. But the victory wasn't just personal, it was communal. Every caregiver who read my book and recognized their own exploitation. Every daughter who installed security cameras after hearing my story. Every family that established clear documentation systems before crisis hit. Every caregiver who demanded respect instead of accepting dismissal. The legislation that now protected millions. The Advocacy Center helping caregivers nationwide. The grant funding new voices telling their stories. The cultural conversation shifting to recognize caregiving as skilled labor, not women's duty. Trent had tried to silence me by exploiting prejudice. Instead, he'd given me a platform to challenge that prejudice systemically. His cruelty became my catalyst. His theft funded Dad's legacy of advocacy. His lies revealed truth about how society treats female caregivers. I thought about the text he'd sent years ago. You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. I'd deleted it then, but now with distance and perspective, I could answer. I hadn't destroyed everything. I destroyed the system that enabled his abuse. I destroyed the narrative that dismissed female caregivers as incompetent. I destroyed the silence around elder financial exploitation. And yes, I was happy. 10 years after the security camera footage changed everything, I stood at another podium, the opening ceremony for the Delton Center for Caregiver Rights' new headquarters in Spokane. The building had been funded by donations from caregivers nationwide, grants from foundations, impressed by our impact, and the remainder of Dad's estate. It housed legal services, counseling support, documentation training rooms, and a library dedicated to caregiver advocacy literature. My father used to say I saved his life, I told the assembled crowd of hundreds. But the truth is, we saved each other. His willingness to face painful truth about his son, his courage in choosing accountability over comfort, that saved me from being gaslit into doubt, and my determination to document and expose that truth saved his assets and dignity. I paused, looking out at faces from across the country. But this building isn't just about us. It's about every caregiver who's been called too emotional, too incompetent, too female to manage family finances. It's about every daughter who's sacrificed her career while brothers contribute nothing but criticism. It's about every unmarried woman told she's failed at life because she chose caregiving over romance. My voice grew stronger. It's about making visible the invisible labor that sustains millions of families. The applause was long and genuine. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, maybe 25, wearing a Delton Center volunteer shirt. I'm writing my master's thesis on your strategic approach to combating elder abuse. My professor called it a masterclass in evidence-based advocacy. She paused, her eyes bright with emotion. I just wanted to say thank you, not just for what you did, but for how you did it. You showed that women don't have to accept dismissal. We can fight back with intelligence and documentation and patience. That evening, I returned to my apartment with that interaction replaying in my mind. The space was filled with mementos of 10 years of work, awards, photos from speaking events, letters from caregivers I'd helped. But the item I treasured most was simple, a printed screenshot of that first security camera notification. Motion detected in bedroom. The alert that had changed everything. I'd had it framed years ago with a caption, "The moment invisibility became evidence." Looking at it now, I thought about the woman I'd been when that notification arrived. 48 years old, dismissed by family, doubted by her own father, systematically undermined by her brother. Terrified she was losing everything, her credibility, her father's trust, his financial security, but also calculating. Smart enough to recognize opportunity, patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. Strategic enough to document systematically before confronting. That woman had been invisible to everyone but herself. She'd known her own worth when no one else did. And she'd fought with evidence, rather than emotion, knowing evidence would win where passion would be dismissed as hysteria. 10 years later, that woman was internationally recognized. But more importantly, millions of caregivers had learned from her story, had installed their own cameras, had documented their own evidence, had refused to be gaslit, had protected themselves and their loved ones, had demanded respect instead of accepting dismissal. The truth I'd learned over 10 years doesn't need revenge. Revenge is immediate satisfaction. Hurting someone who hurt you, tearing down what they built, celebrating their suffering. I'd had opportunities for revenge against Trent. I could have destroyed him more thoroughly, pursued harsher legal consequences, refused any eventual reconciliation. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was truth. Truth that his theft was systematic and deliberate. Truth that his accusations were projections. Truth that gender bias enabled exploitation. Truth that caregivers deserved protection. Truth that documentation was powerful. Truth that patience often defeated immediate confrontation. Truth that women dismissed as too emotional, too old, too single, too incompetent were often the most capable people in the room. Revenge would have made Trent suffer more. Truth made millions of caregivers safer. The choice had always been obvious. I'd taken personal trauma and transformed it into systemic change. I'd taken invisibility and transformed it into visibility for millions. I'd taken dismissal and transformed it into recognition. I'd taken one brother's cruelty and transformed it into protection for countless families. That was power. Real, lasting, meaningful power. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone buzzed with a final message. It was from Trent, a short text after years of limited contact. 10 years ago today, I counted Dad's cash and you started recording. I destroyed our family. You built a movement. The disproportion between my crime and your response is humbling. Thank you for turning my worst into your best. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed a simple response. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I hope you're still doing good work. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was closure. The recognition that we'd both moved forward from that terrible kitchen scene in completely different directions. The story that started with cash counting and false accusations had become something neither of us could have predicted. Not a story of revenge, but of transformation. Not a story of destruction, but of building. Not a story of one family's crisis, but of millions of families protected. Because the truth was this. Trent's betrayal had forced me to become the person I was always capable of being, but might never have discovered otherwise. In trying to destroy me, he'd actually created me. The Monica who gave speeches to thousands. The Monica who influenced federal policy. The Monica who built an organization protecting caregivers nationwide. The Monica who wrote books teaching strategic resistance. That Monica existed because Trent Delton counted his father's cash with his friends and said, they'll never know it's missing. But I'd known. I'd documented. I'd waited. I'd planned. And then I'd systematically dismantled his lies with evidence he didn't know existed. Justice, it turned out, was best served not hot or cold, but strategic. And 10 years later, that strategy was still protecting people he'd never meet, helping families he'd never know about, changing systems he couldn't have imagined. They tried to make me invisible. I made myself undeniable. That's available to every person society tries to diminish. Document your truth. Protect your credibility. Never accept dismissal. And remember, the best revenge is building something that helps millions while your oppressor watches from the shadows they tried to put you in. I exposed my brother. Here's what happened next.